Everyone, trust you all are doing well. If you guys remember from the previous lesson, we finished our view. Now in this one, what we're going to be dealing with is we're going to be dealing with our store method. Right, so what we want to do is we want to create a request, and then we actually want to, when the person replies, they can actually, everything will be done in here. Right, so let's quickly create our request for our store method. All right, so open up your terminal. All right, then what we do is PHP artisan make a request, and this will be a create reply request like this. All right, so we got our request done. In order to get there, we go to app http request create reply request right there, or I can just do like this, create reply request. All right, just learn how to actually do your shortcuts in VS Code. Just press Control P, and then you can actually easily go into that. Right, so the next thing is we can set this to true. All right, set the authorized to true. There's a couple of things in our rules that we want. The body, if you guys remember in the show right here, this part right here, and it clicks that text area for part, that is our body right there. Okay, that we're referring to. And we want that field to be basically required. The next one is we want to replyable ID, this field right here. For our polymorphic relationship, I want this field to be required as well. And the next one is the replyable type. And I want this field to be required. And in just do this in right in the threads table. This is the one way that we can do it. There's another way we can actually concatenate a thread table. All right, we haven't created that constant yet in our thread table. So let's go to our thread model. So if we open our thread model, all right, we can create that constant. All right, so let's create a constant table that's equal to the threads table. Okay. It does the same thing. Let me just show you. So if you can see here, if we put it in threads table, so basically now this will be just threads, okay? So it does the same thing, but you will see in a second why this is very handy. All right, so we're going to do a protected table, and we can equal that to self table. Okay, so we just updated that like this. And so if you have done it like this, okay, so if you have done protected table and we included that to be threads like this, it's all fine, it all works, it does the same thing, but you will see in a second why this is very handy to do it like this. All right, so let's just close off our model now. So we set it up, our thread table right there. Now the next part that we want to do is we want to do a couple of methods inside, not inside our rules, but outside. All right, let's do a couple of private functions. All right, so this one will be a private function, and this will be replyable. And we want you guys remember we did that replyable interface. And just make sure you import it at the top. All right, just make sure that you import that at the top as well. All right, so we got our model right there, which is an interface. All right, and this will basically return this find replyable. Okay, so basically this function will find the replyable, but the thing is we need to create that find replyable, as we haven't created this yet. So let's quickly create that. Right, so this is going to be another private function. And this one is going to be find replyable. And the first one is going to be an integer, and we're going to find it by the ID. Type will be of a string. String type. I'm going to do the same thing. Replyable. Like that. All right, so now we got our private function. Now we're going to create a switch statement. Okay, switch. And this will be for the type. Okay. So if it depends on the type. Okay. So then we're going to go to the case. Will be thread table. Then return thread. So if we find the thread according to that ID that we're going to pass through as a variable right there. Okay, so we got that done. If it doesn't find that table, the thread with that ID, then we just want to abort with a for or faux to say not found. Okay, you guys know what the for or faux means. It means it's not found. All right, so let's finish up our replyable right there. And you remember we need to pass in the integer and we need to pass through the string of type. Okay, so now what we want to do is we want to say this get that replyable ID. Okay, and the next part is we need to get this get replyable come on, spell type. Right, so remember we need to get the integer for the ID, so that's for replyable ID, and we get the string, and that's for the replyable type right there. So when we pass through those two things, if the type is there, put in the type, check the table, and return if it finds that thread. If it doesn't find it, just return a 404. Okay, easy peasy. All right, so we got that all done. So why is the private function? Right. So this one is the public, this one private. Sorry about that. So we just need to make this one public, and this one is the private, because the private function will be used inside our public function. And the public function is available, all right, for our class right there. Okay, for our request class. All right, the next thing that we want to do is, if you guys remember from the previous lessons, what we have done is we returned a couple of things as well. So the first thing is we need to public function for the author. Okay, so we want to know who the author is that created the reply, and we just want to bring in our user model for that as well. Okay, so and we're just going to return this user. All right, if you guys remember when we, let me just open the reply model again, otherwise. So when we created this model helpers, this model will basically use the matches to match the user model for the author right here. Okay, so in that, so the return this user, it will match the user. All right, so the next thing that we want to do is we want to create another public function, and this one is going to be for the body. You will see in a second why all of this is useful. All right, so we got that done, and we're just going to return, because when we're going to create a job, we're going to return a static method, stuff like that, but we're going to get to that in a second. This get body. Right, so we got all of that set up. Okay, so we got our rules, and we set it up our model. We got our public function for replyable, and this is our interface. And the interface is basically returning a private function that will get the replyable ID and the replyable type. Okay, so it will find that, and that is our function right there. And this is to get our author, and this is to get the body. Okay, because we want to know who created the thread, the reply, and all that kind of stuff. All right, so the next thing that we want to do is we want to bring in this request in our let's just open our reply controller right there. So we're going to bring in that request, create reply request. Just bring it in. As you can see, mine is imported at the top. Just make sure yours is imported at the top as well. All right, and now the thing is, what we want to do is we want to say authorize basically this request. All right, so this authorize the reply policy like this. And we have the create. If you guys remember, the create, the user must, the email must be verified. So if we go in here, you'll see under the create policy right there, the user's email must be verified. Right before they can create the request, and we just want to pass through the reply class right there. All right, so we obviously need to create the job to handle the request. All right, so what we want to do is, let me just show you. We're going to do this dispatch sync. All right, and we're going to create a job name, create reply with a static function from request, and then we're going to pass through the request like that. And then we're going to return redirect to a route. And the route will basically be, you know what, we can handle this a little bit differently. Let me just delete this for now, and let's quickly create our job for that. Right, so let's open up our terminal. We're going to do PHP artisan make a job. This is going to be create reply. Right, so enter. As you can see, we got our job created. So how to get there is app. Got app, and then you will have jobs. You will see we got a new one, create reply right there. All right. So in our jobs, we're going to create a couple of variables. Right. The first one that we want to do, let's just create it underneath here. It's going to be a private body. You guys remember the body. All right. The next one is the private, the author. Okay. So we want the author to be there. The next one is the private replyable. So in this case, will basically be the thread. All right. And now we need to, in our construct method right here, what we want to do is we want to bring in a string for our body. And the next one will be for the user author. This needs to be author, user, author. Next one needs to be the replyable interface. And this is replyable. Do it like that. All right, so replyable like that. And then we're going to say this body is equal to body. And this author equal to the author. The last one, this replyable equal to replyable. Okay, so what we're going to do now is we need to create that function. If you guys remember, if we go to our reply controller, this create reply from request. We need to create this static function right here. Right, so we got our job. Let's quickly create that static function. So public static function. All right, and that's going to be from request This is going to, we're going to bring in that create reply request. All right, is it imported? Let's see where I can put it. Right there. All right, so, and then we're just going to pass in the request. Then we return new static. Okay, the first one is going to be the request. Well, let me just type them all out. I'll be with you in a second. All right, so all this does is if we do our validation, if we go into our request right here, we're just calling on the body, the author, and the replyable. All right, so that's all we do when we do this request of body. As you can see, we bring in this body, and if we go to the author, we're just going to this function, and whatever that function returns. All right, so the next, let me just create reply request. We finished that. All right, so let's go on with our job. All right, so now we go to our handle method, and we want to bring in our reply model. Just make sure it's imported right there. Just move this up a bit. User like that. Right, so the next thing that we want to do is, this is actually when we create the reply. Okay, so the reply is going to equal to a new reply. Okay, and inside that, we just want to create the body. And the body is going to equal to this body. Okay, so that's basically now our reply is created. And now we're going to say reply is authored by who is it authored? Authored by this author. And the next one is we're going to reply to. Now I see the reply to, if you guys remember when we created our reply, you remember this right here, this replyable. Now the replyable is the function that we created, so it can be a thread, videos, whatever the case may be. This reply will associate it with the right replyable. Okay, so in this case is we're calling on this method right here. So in a reply to. Now in the reply to will actually show us this dot replyable. Come on. All right. So we associate it with this replyable. So if you remember this right here, that is spelled wrong. This replyable right here is equal to that replyable. Okay, so just make sure that you uppercase the A right there because it needs to match if we call it here. Okay, and then we basically just save the reply. And then we return the reply. We're going to get back to this part right here when we actually do this, subscribe to that thread or to that and stuff like that. We will be on return to this right here. But for now, this works. All right, so let's go to our reply request. Let's just go to our reply controller right there. As you can see, we just make sure we got that imported, that job. All right, so we're going to dispatch sync, create the reply from the request. Then we pass in the request right here. Now the next thing is we need to be able to redirect the user. All right, and we want to redirect that user basically to the same thread that they replied on. All right, so we don't want them to go to a different page. So we're going to create a little bit of a different way to do the redirect right here at the bottom, and we will do that in the next lesson because it's getting a bit too long. So in the next lesson, we're just going to redirect the user. So it will only be a short lesson in that one. Then we're going to continue from there. All right. So thank you guys for watching. If you like the video, please give it a like. If you don't, please give it a dislike. And yes, thank you guys. Just see you in the next one. Goodbye.